Hi, team. Welcome to 10 Talks. Today, I am sharing a dear friend with you. Michelle DeAngelis has been in my life for many, many years, and what a gift. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us today. And team, we're talking about intentional leadership. It goes very much with us really promoting and being for you to be all about intentional living. So today, let's talk about that dimension of professional success. Leadership, how do we do it? What's it all about? And we're going to start with you, Michelle. You are a champion for leadership. Thank you for just the many lives that you lead, the grace that you lead. Oh my gosh, you are just a beautiful example of leadership. And we'd love to hear just a bit about the power of your story.
Of course. Thank you so much for that. And how great for us to team up. When I think about my story and what brought me to this moment in time today, one of the things that comes to mind for me, I literally, not exaggerating, have been a student of leadership for 40 years. And so I feel it's not that I've cracked the code or I'm one of the world's greatest leaders. It's not that. It's that I put into practice some of the greatest thinking from some of the greatest thinkers. And I love sharing that with you today. That's one of the things we'll be talking about today. I think the key is being present, showing up, being present. And people poo-poo that occasionally without realizing that there's huge power in that. And whether it's, sitting across the table from your daughter and you're each on your iPhones, or reading the morning paper while, your kid is trying to tell you about their art project, or tuning out in a meeting. Those are all very natural and easy things to do. And what I'm proposing is that intentionality, you talked about intentional living, that intentionality, that being on purpose and showing up can be brought to leadership. And so that's what I want to talk about today.
Well, let's start with why. What is the power behind intentional leadership? What does it mean? Just take us through what you've learned from great leaders, great thinkers. I know you are a great student of life. So what are some winning strategies that you've learned about really intentional leadership?
One of them is, and I'm not being a smart aleck, is to be intentional, because sometimes we wing it, or we show up last minute, or we phone it in, or there are ways to get by rather than ways to truly excel, have the other people feel acknowledged, really benefit from the messaging that's coming your way. So for me, the first thing is to be intentional. And that's the reason that we're talking about intentional leadership. It's easy to forget, because we're all professionals and we're good, and we can get by. But it's easy to forget to establish an intention. And when I'm working with clients, I'll say it could be on your way from the bathroom to the meeting, or from your refrigerator in your kitchen to your Zoom, at your desk in your bedroom. So it's not like it has to be a big production, but it does have to be. And so that's one of the most important things I've learned. There's a fantastic article that we'll be speaking to today a few months ago in Harvard Business Review. And it's written by Suzanne Patterson, who's a professor at the Thunderbird School of Management. And I'm actually just going to take a second look. It's called How to Develop Your Leadership Style. I've read this article 100 times. I probably have it memorized, but I find that leadership style is something to be cultivated, developed, and intentional. So I'll take you through some of the key points in this article and share with you what I've found to make a really big difference. Now, a funny intro to this story is I was on the phone with an executive coaching client last week, and we were talking all about leadership and big wins and big losses and things like that. And so I said, well, what are your 3 most horrifying moments as a leader? And he was like, oh my gosh. And he rattled them off. And I said, well, let me tell you my most horrifying 3 moments as a leader, because I don't just work as a coach. I also work as an interim leader in companies and lead a lot of big projects. And I'm not going to take you through my 3 horrifying moments, but we ended up, the beauty of it was we ended up laughing at ourselves as a part of this. And then we took the learning from that to bring to a more intentional style and presence in the meetings that came after those horrifying ones. So a good example of just always learning from what we do. And it's not always going to be right. It's not always going to be perfect. One of the things I've learned is that people tend to say, well, I just have to be me. I just have to be authentic. And my position about that is that it's like playing the piano. There are 88 keys on the piano. There are a lot of different notes and sounds that can come out of that one instrument. You can play it hard, you can play it slow, fast, high, low. There's so many variations. It's still a real piano. It's still authentic piano music. It's just conveying a lot of different meanings with how it is played. And so that's my view about ourselves, myself, clients, people when they're wanting to show up their best is it Rachmaninoff played hard and dramatic and profound, or is it a little, soft tinkling noise? Like what will elicit the outcome that you want from that audience? It's the same thing in a meeting. So what I love about this article is it talks about the power of choosing how you want to, the piano example is mine, not a part of the article, but it talks about choosing how you want to show up. And I'll look at this to get it right. Suzanne has a fantastic quote, and she said, you need to be powerful enough to be heard as a leader and attractive enough to be followed. So I think that's a really interesting juxtaposition of power and attractiveness. So the premise of the article is that you need to understand your audience. You need to understand your desired outcome and be very clear about that, crystal clear. And desired outcome to me means how you want to leave them thinking and feeling and doing. So it's harder than it sounds. Some people say purpose of the meeting. No, to me, it's like what happens when the meeting's done. And then the third, so know your audience, know your desired outcome. And then the third thing is understand how you need to show up in your style to get that outcome. So that's what we mean by intentional leadership.
And Michelle, as I listen to you on that, it's just beautiful the way we bring in our authentic self with alignment to those three things. So aligning kind of what song am I playing today? How am I going to show up from the piano using the piano analogy? And so team, that's what I want you to hear as you start to think about you and your leadership style. And just being intentional means to be present, to be on purpose, be, based on your desired outcome. How do you want to show up? So Michelle, as we set that groundwork for intentional leadership, let's talk about the different leadership styles, because I can show up as a leader, my authentic self, different every time based on whatever desired outcome I'm going for. So, how do we really learn our styles, understand what they are, and make sure that we're continuing to develop them versus just saying, this is it, kind of, you got one of me, this is all we're getting.
Right. Love it. And of course, you and I could do a 28-part series on all of the leadership styles. And we would have fun doing that. What I loved about this article by Dr. Patterson is that it allows for, it's almost like flexing different muscles at different times to achieve the different outcomes. So know the audience, know your outcome, and then know how you want to show up to achieve that. Exactly what you said. So what they've done is, and there's been a tremendous amount of research done on this, both quantitative and qualitative. And they decided to separate or differentiate styles into two descriptors. The first one is powerful. The second one is attractive. And people who are perceived as powerful, and it's not like one is good and one is bad. They just are. They're just,
right.
Those are
the power of team, right? They're just teaming up for a great result.
Exactly. And speaking of team, the most successful is a blended style. So they're not advocating that you go in and be all powerful or all attractive. You'll see in a bit that they've broken this up into very specific behaviors. So powerful people are often viewed as very confident, a little more extroverted, more declarative statements than questions, things like that. And attractive people are viewed as welcoming. They tend to narrow the distance, the metaphoric distance between the audience and them. They tend to be warm. They bring people in, use more questions, tend to have more open body language. And interestingly, people who are viewed often as powerful can think that the attractive is a weakness. And people who are often more attractive than powerful can think the powerful people are annoying braggarts, and brash. So and because we all have different styles and we all play the piano differently. So what I would say is understand how you are viewed and by others, because it's or unless you're videotaping yourself, it's very difficult to have an unbiased view of yourself in the moment when you're speaking. I have a client who actually asked her boss, she evaluated herself on the markers that we'll show you in just a moment. And then she asked her boss to evaluate her, knowing that when she's with him, it's usually a more powerful position that she's taking. And there are times that's good and times that maybe that could be improved. But she learned so much from how, and he's a supporter, so he was a truth teller from his perspective.
He's on her support team. So team, I hope you're hearing that, right? Like we want to bring that team in to really help us learn how are we coming across, what's showing up, because as Michelle said, we're going to have one view of us and then other people are going to have another view, and we're going to bring this all into alignment. That's what that's our desired outcome as we talk about this.
Absolutely. And so she learned a tremendous amount from that. So I recommend, first of all, evaluate yourself, pick a meeting, because we're different in different meetings, right? Different audiences, different outcomes. Excuse me. And for me, getting feedback is an important part of the process. So, so I highly recommend that. What is vital is that you go through these steps of, it could be, as I said, as you're walking to the meeting, or you can plan it out the day before, be very intentional about it. Who is this audience? How can I meet them where they are? It's not what I need to tell them. It's what they need to hear in order to arrive at, the desired outcome. So often powerful people can say too much or talk too much, or, because they're passionate about what they're talking about. And sometimes attractive people will be slow to speak up. So again, know the audience, how to meet them where they are. How do you want to leave them thinking and feeling and doing? And just what I love to do is play the movie in my mind. And I know you're a fan of that, Carlette. So I play the movie in my mind of me achieving meeting my audience where they are, achieving my very clear desired outcome, and then showing up with the right style to elicit that response. So I'll talk a little bit about the markers, because they're very, very interesting. So there are, as I said, the two categories, powerful and attractive. The goal is a blended style that is authentic to you and meets your audience outcome, etc. So the first thing they do is they list status markers. And for the powerful, the status markers are more formal, non-deferential address, expanded personal space, taking up a lot of space, interruptions, talkovers, shifting topics abruptly, directive gestures, finger pointing or head shaking or things like that are conveying their thoughts about what someone else is saying. Very little note taking and inattentiveness. checking your phone, checking your watch, wandering, daydreaming. So those are the status markers of the powerful. And some of those things sound rude and embarrassing, and I would never advocate doing them. And yet, some people who go completely attractive need to tiptoe into that more powerful style. So the attractive markers, more informal, deferential, empathetic, displaying empathy, respectful of others' personal space, like mindful of how and where they're fitting into the group, respectful conversational turns, gradual topic shifts, to kind of bring the audience along with you rather than, whiplash with them. They're more polite, they take a lot of notes, and they are highly attentive and engaged. So I'm sure some of you listening can hear and find yourselves in those descriptions. That's just status markers. Where this gets really powerful is the behaviors, the nonverbal and the verbal behaviors. And just before I go to that, Carlette, anything you want to say about status markers and what we've covered so far?
You're doing a beautiful job. And team, just know we're going to listen to this, then we're going to coach you up on really you understanding yours. And we're also going to talk about feedback, because that's what's so important here is Michelle is taking you through really understanding your perception of where you are on these. And then we're going to move into how to receive the feedback to blend these two and show up with the desired outcome of really that intentional leadership.
Love it. Thank you. So the nonverbal, and again, I'm just going to go through the powerful and the attractive as a compare and contrast exercise. So the nonverbal, the person leans backward, creates more physical distance, makes eye contact when speaking, in a very direct way, averts their gaze when they're listening, because that's demonstrating their power, right, over the topic. The tendency to stare, very serious expressions, controlled movements, and talking while moving away. All powerful, nonverbal style markers. Attractive, leaning forward, physical closeness, eye contact when listening, averted gaze when speaking. It's interesting, it's the exact opposite. And visual learners often avert their gaze when they're speaking, having nothing to do with power or attractive, because they're seeing up here, they're seeing what they're talking about. So it's interesting that when you may feel very powerful and confident about something, you may actually avert your gaze when you're speaking. Just things to notice. Tendency to break eye contact, happy expressions, natural movements, and the body is square while talking instead of like moving away or turned. So those are all, you can tell from the description, they're all a bit warmer, narrowing the distance between the person. And then the last category, because I know this is a lot, but the verbal style. And I know that many of you will see yourselves here. So again, powerful first and then attractive. The powerful, longer talking, longer speech duration, faster, louder volume, more direct, declarative statements, fewer what they call non-fluencies, fewer ums, well, because they're powerful in their communication about it.
They're on mission with that delivery.
Yeah, absolutely. Intense words, technical jargon, careful pronunciation, very exclusive language that's I oriented, a lot of I, me, my team, I did, things like that. And those people aren't necessarily trying to hog the spotlight. It's just their view of, their place in that setting, and a tendency for more humor. That's all the powerful verbal styles. The attractive, shorter speaking, slower, softer, more indirect, asking more questions rather than making declarative statements, more of the non-fluencies. Well, maybe this may not work, but a lot of hedging. And more relaxed pronunciation. They're not quite as interested in being precise. inclusive language, we, ours, together, we, and less humor, and certainly no sarcasm. So that's and you'll see this, but that's the list of powerful versus attractive. And you can imagine, like when my one client went through and rated herself, she really was a mix. And I had her rate herself for 3 different meetings because she shows up differently, and we all show up differently. What I asked her to do, and what all of you might consider doing, is choosing one of the markers that you very seldom use that you think will help with your desired outcome. So if instead of always being so polite and smiley and warm and all that, if it will convey more gravitas, more heft, more cred, then try showing up a little bit differently in that meeting for that outcome.
So team, what's beautiful about this just coaching that we're getting to experience is that you have the power to really show up and achieve your desired outcome based on the skills that you have. And so if you think about this from a sports perspective, every opponent is different. We're playing the same game, but we've got to really focus on how to win at our game based on their strengths or desired outcomes. So it's a beautiful analogy, just bringing those two together in terms of really determining what your desired outcome is. What do I want to achieve in this exchange, this conversation, this meeting? It can be just anything you're doing. We're bringing you back to being very, very intentional and really being intentional about who you are, who you want to serve and support, and how together collectively you want to bring this result that achieves the desired outcome. So we know what we want. We've gotten some new skills on how to do it. We think we're doing it. We've watched our film, as we would say, and we're like, I've nailed this. I want it. I've got it. Now we get some feedback. We get some feedback from either a coach or from our boss or from some, part of our support team. And it's really different than our perception of what we're all about. So Michelle, take us through just how to receive feedback, how that works, how to keep feedback into forward focus so that I receive it and I push myself into that learning versus defending myself or being discouraged about it.
Thank you for that. It's, the best response to any feedback is thank you for the feedback.
Exactly.
and that sounds so easy, and boy, that is so hard. So that's
Michelle, I'll just add to that. One of our winning strategies is all information is good information, right? So team, we're just going to give you a double whammy there in terms of thank you and all information is good information. That way I'm receiving everything and I'm staying open rather than closing down and starting to go into that defensive mode, or defending means pushback. So if I'm open, I'm receiving versus I'm defending, I'm pushing you away. So here we go. We've got you set up for feedback, gratitude. Thank you for the feedback. And number 2, all information is good information.
Love it. Love it. I'm stealing that, by the way. That's great.
Power of team. It's all yours, baby.
So what I find, and what I'm guessing you will find, is that getting very specific behavioral, actionable feedback is hard. Some people may say, well, you're just, I don't know, you're not credible enough. You're not senior enough. You're not, you come across as young, even though you're very capable. I mean, so it's like global warming, it's like, what do I do with that? And so when I'm working with people, I say, global warming, we understand, conceptually, we get that. Now, what are you going to do about it? So we talk about, you separate the plastic from the cans, from the glass in your recycling bin. And, and of course, there's 100 examples. So to get it behavioral and actionable is really the key. And it asks a lot of the person giving you the feedback. So one of the things I ask my clients to use, excuse me, is what would that look like? It's this sort of the what would success look like? And it's not, well, what would that look like? Because you're obviously, full of it. It's, I would love to achieve that. I don't see a way right now to do that. What would that look like? Just give me an idea. So occasionally, depending on the nature of the feedback, you can ask that as a question. So, you have a natural style where you will just show up. If you're not intentional, you will just show up in that, whatever that style is. If you are intentional, then you know you're going for a very specific outcome. So if you have a trusted person who is in a meeting with you, or on a team with you, and will be a truth teller and will give you some true feedback, then that's great. So what you might hear, you don't have enough gravitas, you don't have enough cred. Well, what behaviorally, what you are doing is you're being too attractive. And you need to insert some powerful into your leadership style. So that can be as simple as how you dress. It can be using a pause so that you're not filling every moment, with words. It can be, and you can literally just go down the column, because Carlette's going to provide this to you, and figure out what you could feel still authentic incorporating, but that would move you on that spectrum from attractive to more powerful. It's amazing. I have seen people change in very subtle ways, and and then they get the promotion, or they get the advancement because they are recognized as having that gravitas. Another one, your team is afraid of you. And that's just you're coming across way too powerfully. And so those of you in that column can look at the attractive column, use more questions, make fewer declarative statements, engage people and get them speaking, not just you speaking. Another one, you're too nice. And I've worked with clients who, when I talk to their manager, their CEO, whoever it is, they'll say she's just too nice, or she's just too polite. Well, of course, that's her repertoire. Her natural style pulls a lot from the attractive column. And so she needs to take more from the powerful column, even just one or two things. I'm not talking about personality transplant. And really hold her position, hold her space, because you can be incredibly respectful, of course, and without being rude or anything, and also very firm in your stance. So those are just a few examples of decoding the feedback and turning it into a behavioral action that you can intentionally direct.
So team, what you're getting to hear is the feedback is the what. And most importantly, once we've got the what, we want to know the how. So that how is really that action to change that moves us into forward focus, helps us to become who we want to be, helps us to really lead intentionally. So thank you, Michelle, for this great conversation all about intentional leadership. And so as we finish our conversation, what are some words of wisdom over your 25 years of really delivering great coaching and development for people to really become and discover their best? Words of wisdom.
Be willing to be uncomfortable. Be incredibly brave in the moment. Bring your leadership courage. And I always remind myself what will be in service to others and what will make me proud of myself. So in my reel, I want to, if I'm watching that, that's how I want to feel.
So team, it's your turn. You get to go out and live intentionally and be an intentional leader. We've coached you up. We've given you some new skills. And so most importantly, you and your life matter, honor you, be intentional about however you choose to invest your time, your energy, emotions, and be a champion for you and your well-being. Thank you very much, Michelle, for sharing this conversation with us.
Go champion. Yeah.
Go team, absolutely. Okay, team, it's up to you. Go out and be a champion for your well-being and win the week.